Hello, everyone, and welcome to the WLI Asia-Oceania Webinar on Wetland-based Solutions for Climate Change. My name is Adam, and I'm an Assistant Network Officer at RCEA, and I will be your moderator today. The concept of nature-based solutions emerged in the late 2000s and has continued to develop across a range of fields. As we know, wetlands stand at the heart of nature-based solutions, benefiting both people and the biodiversity. Uh, in today's uh, in today's learning session, we will explore how wetlands function as essential components of nature-based solutions and disaster risk reduction. Our case study speakers will share their experiences and insights from the unique context in which they work. We hope this webinar helps us broaden our understanding of nature-based solutions with a particular focus on how wetlands can support climate action and help reduce disaster risks. Okay, before we begin, we wanted to share a few notes from today's webinar. If you are having technical difficulties, the first thing you can do is to leave the webinar and rejoin. Otherwise, you can type in the chat and we will try to help. And if any, please leave your questions in the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen at any point during the presentation. Our speakers will respond to them during the Q&A break. And then lastly, today's webinars will be recorded and uploaded to RCA's YouTube channel. Okay, now we are ready to begin our sessions. We have an exciting lineup of speakers today to share their experiences with us on the topic of wetland-based solutions for climate change. First up is Professor Misaka. He's a senior fellow of WWF US and also a professor at James Cook University. He will give us a lecture about wetlands as nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction. Again, please leave your questions in the Q&A chat. So welcome, let's welcome Professor Misaka. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Aram. Shall I share my screen for yeah, okay, perfect. Is it in the presentation mode?
Yes.
Lovely, thank you. Hello, everyone. I would like to start by thanking RRCEA for inviting me to do this presentation today, and it's always a pleasure to meet and be with my fellow wetlanders from Asia. So the topic today would be wetlands as nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction. The easiest way to start this discussion is by saying disasters are rising. We all know that, we all see it around us, and that's exactly what the statistics say as well. If you look at this chart, it shows that definitely there's a rising trend in the disaster events recorded. This is not even this doesn't even say about the magnitude of the disasters or the damage that they cause. This is just the sheer number recorded every year. And here, along with an increasing trend, we also see the majority of disasters, the major rise in disaster incidents is actually coming from the hazards, disasters caused by hydrological and meteorological hazards, which are namely floods, cyclones, landslides, and so on. In the right-hand side, you can see pictures from couple of major hydrometeorological disasters recorded in the last 10 to 20 years. The cyclone Haiyan of 2023, which was at the time the biggest, the most devastating cyclone to have made a landfall up to that point. And the picture below, the photo below is from Kerala floods of 2019. You can just understand the sheer scale of these disasters. And it's very clear that this rising trend of disasters is mostly triggered and caused by climate change. You can see in the graph that there's again a clear increase of extreme weather events and extreme weather related disasters increasing very clearly from 2011 to 2020. And the successive IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, have been reporting that even a moderate warming scenario of 1.5 to 2 centigrades above the pre-industrial levels can actually have severe and pervasive risk of hydromet disasters. And this is not any future prophecy. We are actually experiencing this right now. This is a more recent picture from a recent disaster, which was 2024, the Dera floods in Libya, where I think above 11,000 people were killed in one medium-sized town in Libya. The media coverage of it was, rightly attributed it to climate change as well. You can see this report from Nature saying the Libya floods, how climate change intensified deaths and devastation. But we sometimes miss things in finer print. Right? It says 2 dams breached during the floods, sending 30 million cubic meters, 30 million cubic meters of water to Dera. So these 2 dams were actually constructed a few decades ago, one with the primary objective of controlling floods, and the other one was a water supply dam. And due to the ongoing civil war, of course, the maintenance of these huge structures were somewhat neglected, and that introduced a massive risk which did not exist previously. So the same structures which were built to reduce the flood risk, ultimately, due to a number of reasons, added to the flood risk and causing extraordinary damage and loss of life. So this makes us rethink how to effectively reduce disaster risks. Are we doing something wrong here? So let's start with the definition of a disaster. What is a disaster? So this is the UNDRR, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction definition, general definition. It keeps changing. This is generally the general definition. It says a serious disruption of society causing widespread human, material, or environmental losses that exceed the ability of the affected society to cope using only its own resources. So it has to be has to cause significant human, material, or environmental losses. And the societies or the ecosystems affected by the disaster the event should cause substantial enough damage to these communities and ecosystems that they can't bounce back without external support. Now, if you look at the picture above, which is also an extensive flood, this is what annual flooding looks like in the Amazon region of Brazil. Now, this is a flooded area, flooded forest area. If you look at it carefully, none of the characteristics that is given in the definition uh, of a disaster can be seen here. It's definitely not causing any widespread human, material, or environmental losses. And it can, we are sure that the ecosystem can bounce back on its own after the flood is gone, and most probably bounce back and thrive with all the nutrients that are brought to the landscape with the flood. So every hazard does not necessarily become a disaster. So that's where we have to begin. No disaster is natural. There are natural hazards, right? Like floods, cyclones, which are not processes, but disasters are not. Some hazards are essential natural processes. Example, floods, as we can see here. Annual flooding in most ecosystems, especially wetland ecosystems, is an essential process for the survival of these ecosystems. Now, what converts a natural hazard into a disaster? So let's quickly go through some definitions of other risk-related terminology. I'm not going to read this out. I'll give you a few seconds for each definition for you to read. So there are natural hazards, which can potentially cause damage. And there's exposure, where people, communities, ecosystems can be exposed to those hazards. There's vulnerability, the conditions determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors, which increase the susceptibility of an individual or a community to these hazards. And then the capacity of those communities and ecosystems to cope with those hazards. So disasters only happen when communities are exposed and vulnerable to the hazards and when they lack capacity to cope with them. So how do we reduce disaster risks and climate risks? So if we go by the definition, number one, we can manage or reduce hazards. There are a number of methods available to do that. Some are nature-based, like restoring wetlands, improving urban permeability, and so on. And there are other engineered methods using hard structures like dams to reduce the floodwaters or that are coming into a floodplain, or protect building wave barriers to protect coastal communities from tidal waves and so on, storm surges. So one approach is to manage or reduce the hazard. The other approach is to reduce the vulnerability of the communities, or the susceptibility of the communities to these hazards. If you can see the photo in the top left-hand corner, this is a low-income community from in the vicinity of Colombo, capital of Sri Lanka. And this community is very, very clearly highly susceptible to damage and losses from flood and other hazards, right? The third approach is to increase the capacity of the communities to deal with hazards. This photo, the top right-hand side photo, is from Bangladesh, where they have a very strong cyclone preparedness program where community groups are mobilized ahead of any cyclone, which can cause significant damage, to warn the villagers and evacuate them and take them to safer areas. Now, the concept of disaster risk reduction is based on this concept of on these three things: managing the hazards, reducing vulnerability, and increasing capacity. The concept of DRR aims to prevent new disaster risks, whether they are man-made or coming from natural hazards, reducing the existing risks, first preventing new disaster risks and reducing existing risks, and then once those two are achieved, managing the residual risks. It's based on the ethic of prevention rather than response. If we can prevent a disaster, that's the priority rather than letting a disaster happen and then responding. Look at socio-environmental systems holistically, understanding our landscapes as socio-environmental systems, not just human communities and ecosystems or ecological features existing separately side by side. And then last but not the least, promote full engagement of stakeholders and the communities. Now, where do nature-based methods come here? Both nature-based methods and nature-based solutions roughly refer to the same thing. It has many definitions. The International Conservation Union, IUCN, definition goes as actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural and modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously benefiting people and nature. So that is very important. Like these are processes based on natural processes. These are initiatives based on natural processes, which should simultaneously benefit people and nature. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers definition is much simpler, say use of environmental system to accomplish multiple purposes. This seminar will not let us go into very details of what are the types of methods and so on. But definitely wetlands can play a big role as nature-based solutions in reducing disaster risks, because number of hazards, types of hazards are associated with wetlands. As we can see, when we hear the word floods, wetlands come into our mind. Most of coastal wetlands are actually they exist in the paths of usual cyclone paths. Wetlands also exist in areas where heavy erosion can happen, both in coastal areas as well as riverine ecosystems. Although wetlands are not, our common sense does not associate wetlands with fires that much. Wetlands are often sites of forest fires because in certain wetlands, especially where very combustible material such as peat exists, there is significant fire hazard. And then, okay, so how does wetlands work in favor of disaster risk reduction? So some hazards, as floods and cyclones, are part of wetland processes. They are essential for the existence as well as succession of wetlands. Some hazards can be regulated by wetland ecosystem services, especially hazards such as floods. We all know that, but other hazards such as cyclone damage can also be regulated by wetlands. But we should not forget that some hazards can also affect and disrupt wetland processes. We can see after extensive damage due to hazards such as floods and cyclones, some wetland ecosystems take years to bounce back and come back to their natural processes. So there are some examples where I come from, Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka. The marshlands around the city are an integral part of the city's flood protection scheme. In New York's tidal wetlands, which are slightly different from freshwater marshes of Colombo, helps to protect the city from hurricanes. How do wetlands perform this regulatory action? Wetland ecosystems are always in an equilibrium between among hydrology, the wetland biota, the wetland vegetation and animals, and also the physiochemical environment such as sediments, soils, and so on. So they are always in a balance of these three. When one aspect change, if you change the wetland hydrology, it affects the biota, and it can also change the soils and water chemistry, and so on. In most healthy wetlands, these three factors are in an equilibrium, they are in balance. When they are in balance, they can actually provide better ecosystem services. As we can see, wetland ecosystem services, there's a multitude of wetland ecosystem services, provisioning services such as food, fuel, fiber, and so on. There's regulating services, and then cultural services, as well as life support services. Especially in DRR, the regulatory services of wetlands play a big role. They can regulate flood hazards as well as storm hazards. And not only that, when communities are bouncing back, when communities are recovering from disasters, wetlands play a big role. Number one, if there are communities reliant on for livelihoods on the wetlands provide fresh water, food, fuel, and so on, letting the communities bounce back stronger. But also, they provide cultural services, spiritual and aesthetic services, which actually psychologically help the communities to recover during those hard and difficult periods. In addition to that, wetlands play a significant role in both in climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. Wetlands do capture carbon. We all know that, which contributes to climate change mitigation by sequestering carbon. Wetlands play a role in capturing or keeping the methane emissions low as well, which is a much higher potential GHG greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. They help regulate climate-driven hazards, as we discussed, which is hazards such as floods. In that sense, supporting climate change adaptation. But also here, we should remember wetlands can also be affected by climate change. They are vulnerable to climate change as well. I won't go into explaining the whole diagram here. We can actually, it's self-explanatory. Wetlands do play a pivotal role in both in climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. So how do wetlands reduce disaster risks? So let's take the example of floods here. Wetlands can, so these are some examples that I'm taking. This is not the full spectrum of how wetlands contribute to reduce disaster risks. Just some examples. Wetlands can reduce flood flows into a floodplain, as we can see here. One of the examples is New York's tidal wetlands. Wetlands act as natural reservoirs. They provide flood storage during storms, so they can provide both storm regulation and flood regulation. And wetlands can naturally grow and shrink, unlike other hard engineering structures such as dams, which is actually which makes them adaptive systems. Some types of wetlands that can provide this service of flood and storm regulation are floodplain marshes, tidal wetlands, and natural lakes. Oh, sorry. And in certain areas, wetlands can buffer runoff within the floodplain. So even when water enters a flood-prone area or floodplain, it can temporarily detain runoff, reduce the velocity of runoff, which reduces the damage, increase infiltration, and then slowly recharge the groundwater. And this actually have an added benefit where there's recharged groundwater then increases the dry weather flow in the dry seasons. This is really helpful in mitigating or managing urban disaster risks, urban hazards. Wetland types like floodplain marshes, paddy fields, ponds, bogs, and fens are examples for this. The picture or the diagram that I have in the left is actually the extensive pond system that you can see in Coimbatore, India, which had kept the flood risks mitigated or abated the flood risks in that rapidly growing city for many decades now. It's changing, the risks are rising, but I think the city is indebted to this intricate pond system for its disaster risk reduction. And then thirdly, as we discussed earlier, wetlands can help communities to live with floods. Right? Certain floods drive ecosystem services. They can be used for seasonal cultivation. If you properly use them, this can turn floods from a risk to an opportunity, and that actually supports flood recovery. I'm taking just flood as an example. This can apply to a number of other hazards as well. So this brings us to another concept, not just disaster risk reduction or DRR. When you use natural processes to provide disaster risk reduction, we called it eco-DRR, ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. By definition, it's healthy ecosystems, including wetlands, provide ecosystem services which can reduce the risk posed by natural hazards. So healthy management of wetlands, strengthening wetland services, and will actually support disaster risk reduction and recovery in communities. So ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction supports wetland ecosystems to recover from hazard impacts, right? And through all this, we do not have time to go into detail of this in this lecture, but community engagement is a must for equitable and sustainable disaster risk reduction. Without community engagement, there's no disaster risk reduction. Any action taken for disaster risk reduction without proper community engagement, I'm not just talking about just consultation, superficial consultation here, proper community engagement, any DRR action taken without proper community engagement will ultimately, in the long run, increase the disaster risks. Ramsar, because most of you represent Ramsar wetlands, it has to be noted the Ramsar Convention has taken DRR under its fold for some time now. It has fully established the importance of DRR in wetlands management. It has been integrated into Ramsar policy, especially the resolution 1213 with the strategic action plan of from 2016 to 2024. So it's actually policy now. It's not some wishful thinking anymore. Number of Ramsar documents and guidelines have been developed along these lines. Some of you might also be aware and familiar with these guidelines, including the ROWES procedure and Handbook 18 and so on. In 2022, I was very fortunate to be a part of this project developing the wetlands and disaster risk reduction guideline for wetland management managers. It was a very concise guideline, but it introduces the nexus of natural hazards and wetlands. It promotes the concept of eco-DRR how to incorporate DRR in discusses how to incorporate DRR in wetland management with examples. It's primarily aimed for Ramsar wetland managers, but also provides guidance for generally for all wetland managers. Aram, we can provide a QR code or something, or the link how to download it at the end, right? Okay. And to close this, this guideline. It doesn't stop here. There is like a very rich collection, very rich wealth of documents, guidelines, data sources, collections of case studies now available on nature-based methods, or nature-based solutions. These are some of them. As it was said when I was introduced, I represent the World Wildlife Fund. We have a program called Environment and Disaster Management, under which there was a 10-year project to develop and disseminate this natural and nature-based flood management green guide. And US Army Corps of Engineers developed like a comprehensive 1,000-page technical manual on natural and nature-based features of flood risk management. There are scores of other resources as well. So please take your time to explore them. I will. Sorry, I couldn't. I was thinking of including it as a slide, but with some QR codes or links. But I'll try to provide it later so that it can be disseminated among the participants. Some of our knowledge products, as well as links to other external knowledge products. So please take your time to have a look around. I think the case studies that would be discussed after this would actually give you a much better idea of how to practically achieve this concept of integrating nature-based solutions and as a wetland as a part of it to achieve disaster risk reduction. Thank you. Over to you, Aram, and I'll take any questions now. If there's time for that, or else I'm happy to wait for the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Misaka. You gave us like from general knowledge of nature-based solutions, eco-DRR, to the real examples of on-site. Yeah, it was also wonderful to know like multiple services that wetlands offer, and also its vulnerability to the climate change. So I will try to invite some questions from the floor. No questions at the moment, which is usually a good sign that the presentation was nice and clear. But if Professor Misaka, if you're available until the end of the webinar,
Sure.
we can also accept some questions. Okay, so moving on to the case study session. We are going to hear the case studies on site in Thailand and the Philippines and India, respectively. If you have a question, feel free to drop them in the Q&A chat box. If you sometimes the mobile Zoom does not like show Q&A box. In that case, you can always leave the questions on the chat box. So I would like to first invite Professor Sansani of Mahidol University, also a member of Thailand's Wetlands Technical Working Group. Let's hear a story from her about urban green wetlands for climate mitigation in Thailand. Professor Sansani, you have the stage.
Thanks, Arun. I also thanks Wetland Link International, Asia-Oceania, and of course, Ramsar Regional Center, East Asia, for giving me an opportunity to share with you about the roles of urban green wetlands for climate change mitigation in Thailand. Actually, the list of climate change challenges to cities can be very long. For Thailand, more than half of the total population lives in cities, facing with rising temperature, heat islands, effects, heat domes, and especially seasonally and periodically, high levels of particulate matters and air pollutants, and rapid urbanization and shrinking green areas are parts of those causes. I would like to introduce the area named Bang Krachao, an urban green wetlands of Samut Prakan province. On the map here at the middle, the photo at the middle, the Chao Phraya River runs through Bangkok, then surrounded these wetlands, past Samut Prakan province, and flows into the Gulf of Thailand. Bang Krachao has a very, very unique shape, a total area of about 16 square kilometer, and it can be seen very clearly from the bird eye view. Okay, Bang Krachao area comprises unspoiled natural green area and semi-natural areas of all three major ecosystems: fresh, brackish, and saline. Wetlands here include rivers, canal, and stream network, freshwater lakes, ponds, swamps, and marshes, brackish and mangrove forest. Biodiversity of terrestrial and aquatic life is very high. Almost altogether 640 species of flora and fauna, including species rare to urban areas and species firstly found in Southeast Asia. People of 6 sub-districts live here in a very simple ways of life based on integrated farming systems and sufficiency economy. Actually, the residential area is only about 15% of the total area. There are 12 temples altogether in the area, and one is a national archaeological site. The overall ecosystems of Bang Krachao provides various significant roles, functions, and services for climate change mitigation and disaster risk reduction. Its vast varieties of plants, forestries, and mangroves absorbs and store more than 6,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year. Also produces more than 6 million tons of oxygen every day, provides flows of fresh air to the dense, congested Bangkok and industrial Samut Prakan province. The area reduces the urban heat island effects, helps cope with rising temperature. For more than 9 months a year, the monsoon wind from the Gulf of Thailand passes Samut Prakan and Bang Krachao before reaching Bangkok. These green wetlands help trap particulate matters and air pollutants, purify and forward fresh air to Bangkok. In 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, this area has been a natural refuge, helps enhance health, mind, and wellness of the people. Moreover, Bang Krachao and the wetlands here has a water storage capacity of around 2.5 million cubic meter, and that helps mitigate overflows and floods in both Bangkok and Samut Prakan. The forestries and the root systems of mangroves help trap sediment from river and tides, add natural soil fertility, stabilize the land, mitigate soil and coastal erosion. Wetlands and canal networks also enhance water flow and circulation, helps slow down, reduce the distance and duration of seawater intrusion. Bang Krachao is fully equipped with educational facilities and natural interpretation media. These nature education services are very, very important benefits to the public, children and youth, and of course, all visitors. Bang Krachao has various different attractions and activities for recreation and ecotourism, and has become very popular among visitors for relaxation, exercises, boat rides, bird watching, fireflies sighting, visiting Botanic Garden, Forest Park, and Gallery of Siamese fighting fish, and many other things. In terms of socio-cultural economic benefits, these wetlands continuously provides sustainable income to local residents while preserving the green areas and natural resources. This green wetlands is taken care of and managed by Samut Prakan Provincial Administration Organization, Royal Forest Department, along with continuously significant efforts, collaboration, support of various different sectors in various ways and means, and have several collaborative projects and activities. In terms of status, since the 1970s, Bang Krachao has been protected, illegally managed, declared, rewarded, and referred to as protected green space, environmentally protected area, one of the best urban oasis of Asia, this one by the Time magazine back in 2006, and referred to as the green lung of Bangkok. At present, Bang Krachao area is publicly well known as a good model, good example of green area conservation management. The area has even also inspired the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration to initiate and implement the project so-called Gardens in the Metropolitan. The Bangkok administration, the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration has very clear policies, action plans, and various projects, including the climate plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, master plan on climate change, resilient Bangkok plan, Green Bangkok 2030, which aims to increase its green areas from the present average of 7.49 square meter per person to reach the World Health Organization's recommendation of minimum 9 square kilometer per person. And also Bangkok 2032 to try to become a green, comfortable city by increasing number and areas of district park, pocket park, and of course, green wetlands. Lastly, this should be the last slide. Lastly, there are some points which I would like to highlight. Firstly, wetland-based climate variability mitigation. At that time, I mean, long time ago, only climate variability, not change yet. So wetland-based climate variability mitigation actually existed and applied since the ancient times. Wetlands of various types and sizes have been used to help cope with a wide range of climate change-related and disaster risk, especially floods, droughts, forest fires, winds, waves, storms, and many others. So, existing wetlands, both healthy, not very healthy, and even the destroyed one, need to be mainstream protected, conserved, restored and rehabilitated, and well managed. Under the light of climate change and more severe disaster risk, wise use of wetlands should be encouraged, promoted, mainstreamed, integrated into climate change mitigation and disaster risk reduction action plans. Finally, to raise public awareness. This is very, very important and needed. Case studies, examples, models of wetland-based climate change mitigation and disaster risk reduction should be explored, collected, compiled, and recorded and disseminated. I think that's all from me. Thanks very much, and please do visit Thailand, and I hope to see you or some of you at Bang Krachao area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sansani, for presenting the case study in Thailand. It's very impressive to see collaborating management between public and private sector to preserve this urban wetland. And also we can see all different like tangible and also intangible benefits of like how urban wetland can offer for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's continue with our next case study. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Anadel, who is the country manager of Wetland International Philippines. She will share a story about integrated river basin management for climate change adaptation in the Philippines. Dr. Anadel, you have 15 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Arun. I'll share now my slides.
Yes, please.
Share. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
So you can open the slide.
All right. It's should be opening now. Sorry to thank you very much for this opportunity to share our story on the Cagayan de Oro River Basin in Mindanao. We are sharing this information that we have on integrated river basin management, which we consider to be a climate change adaptation. I always believe that when your river or hydrology, the watershed and the river are in good condition, this is an adaptation to climate change, which is impending with extreme events happening or impacting our country. So this story is in Cagayan de Oro River Basin in Mindanao. You can see here the map of the Philippines. Mindanao is on the southernmost island, and the river is on the northern part of the country. Mindanao. Cagayan de Oro River is a river that drains two mountains, Mount Kinanglad and Mount Kalatungan. This is a mountain range that is actually a natural or national park. However, on the borders of the park, there is deforestation. So the hydrology of the river has been destroyed. So when as you can see here, how it is like a funnel, the several rivers drain into one big river system, like here, Cagayan de Oro River, that leads to Makahalar Bay. So when there was a big storm that happened in 2011, 14 years ago, the water came rushing down with logs and other debris into Cagayan de Oro City, where there's a lot of people. This is an urbanized area, and it has caused a lot of loss of property and life. So this woke up a lot of people in the downstream area, in the urban area, and they reached out to a friend, a colleague in the Netherlands also, who is in water management, and they developed this East Coast Rain to Duck project. You can see this on the left panel are basically the threats of in the watershed and in the river basin. There's stream events, the high precipitation, eroded mountain sides, and clogged rivers, tributaries, and lots of plantation along the sides, fruit plantation. That's contributing to the water difficulties or hazards. So what we want to have is basically on the right side of the poster, where we have a good watershed, the catchment is restored, the rivers are draining well, there's improved water management supply, infrastructure, and the areas downstream are livable. This project has been funded by the Dutch government through the Dutch Enterprise Agency. And so Wetlands International has been invited by this group of water district officers and other stakeholders to manage one package of the big project. And this work package is number 2, which is to reduce the risk of flooding. The Wetlands International, as an environmental NGO focusing on the conservation and sustainable use of wetlands like rivers, we wanted to promote integrated river basin management for this package. And for this, there are 3 components of the project. 1, watershed rehabilitation, rainforestation. I explain more about this. Hydrological modeling and decision support tool, which is needed to guide the reforestation of the watershed, and payment for ecosystem services to raise funds for rehabilitation of the forest. We cannot just depend on government funds for the rehabilitation of forests. So the integrated river basin management is one nature-based solution. And you can see in this table that there are actually several nature-based approaches. And the approach that we took in the Cagayan de Oro River Basin East Coast Rain to Duck project is integrated river basin management or integrated water resources management, which falls under the category for ecosystem-based management approach. I will not mention anymore the other categories in the table due to lack of time. And so for this work package, as I mentioned, there are 3 components, and now I'm going to proceed to discuss the different components of the project. For the watershed management or rehabilitation, we partnered with a private sector. This private sector has a corporate social responsibility arm, a foundation. They call it the Hinleban Foundation. The Hinleban Foundation partnered in turn with the 17 tribes here in the photo in the mountains. These are indigenous people. And so it's called the Hinleban Foundation, and which is very good. The reforestation approach has actually 2 subcomponents, if you may, a socioeconomic component, which was stressed by the former speaker, that is important for disaster risk reduction. The rainforestation component that was promoted by Hinleban Foundation has actually 3 items or focus in implementing it. First, there's this module enhancing environmental appreciation for the community. It includes or encourages the community to appreciate the community nature even more, appreciate trees and how the trees support the hydrology, the absorption of rain, excess rain, and filtering of the water into the ground table, a water table. The other part is the construction of a community garden, which encourages the community to be more united, or what we call in Filipino, bayanihan, we as a community working together. And then also after developing the community garden, there's another development that the Hinleban Foundation encouraged, which is developing the livelihood. And this is including the growing of coffee or adlai. Adlai is a grain that is very important for people who are affected by or suffering from diabetes. So for this approach makes the people achieve or attain basic needs such as food. When there's a community garden, there is food that can be harvested or used. And in fact, during the pandemic, this was useful for the community. They were able to eat and from the gardens that they have. And once a community has food on their table and money in their pockets, they are more willing to and open to undertake reforestation of the forest. So let me just illustrate this a little bit more, this socioeconomic component. This picture shows the community building the garden and the growing of adlai. Adlai, this is a grain here held by the hand here. And the developing of another livelihood like coffee here. And these products are actually bought or purchased by the Hinleban Foundation. They process it and sell it to the market in the urban areas and sold in very specialized stores like health stores. The photo here with the dish is how adlai can be prepared. And the other part of the rainforestation approach is the ecological component. There are two parts here. When the forest is denuded, trees are gone, the landscape is covered by or taken over by grass or kogon, as we call it. So this kogon has to be eliminated first before the actual planting of saplings or seedlings of trees. And so the way to eliminate this is by shading using Calliandra species. This Calliandra species grows fast, and once it grows fast, it shades over the kogon grass and kills the kogon, which will be a competitor of saplings of trees. And so trees can be planted once the kogon grass is eliminated, and these trees or saplings are collected from the area, and if there are seeds, they are germinated. It's a combination of native trees and fruit trees that are planted by the community. Fruit trees will provide food as well as source of products that can be sold downstream. So in short, this ecological component sort of mimics and shortcuts the ecological succession that happens in natural system, in natural forest. When there's a gap in the forest, it's small seedlings begin to colonize and reforest the area. So this is another illustration. The kogon grass here is covered, shaded by Calliandra, and here saplings are planted and sometimes cared for with rings around and weeded over. So the actual process of rainforestation actually takes some time. For instance, if you just have 1 year for working with the community, building the value system of the community or enhancing the value system of the community, building the garden, building backyard gardens, and another year maybe on developing livelihoods. Then it's on the 4th year that you will start preparing the land for replanting. So rainforestation takes a long time, but because it's lodged with the community, it's more longer lasting, and because it's also mimicking natural processes, it's also the success or the survival of the trees is actually high, 80% or more. The other part of the integrated river basin management is the hydrological modeling and decision support tool. The hydrological model is actually built on the flood model, the erosion model, dry season model. This is built on the science on the infiltration of the water, the groundwater. In addition to this, there are information on the funds needed for reforestation. So there is an investment model. Together, we have these models of flood, erosion model, dry season model, and investment model made into a computer hydrological model. And this is translated into a decision support tool, which will be understandable by stakeholders, by the public. This decision support tool will illustrate that if you invest in a certain amount for the reforestation of the forest, it will reduce the risk of flooding downstream. So that's why it is called the decision support tool. This is an interface that can be easily understood and is downloadable, affordable, and easily downloaded from the internet. And of course, many hands make work light, and many contributors to the investment in the rehabilitation of the forest is important. And so we need to build the payment for ecosystem services, which is the avenue or the channel for which individuals or the company or private sector in general contribute to forest communities to be able to reforest. And so we worked with the Cagayan River Basin Management Council. It is a multi-stakeholder platform. And you can see the structure here. It has a technical working group. And this technical working group has also come up with a strategy for the rainforestation or the rehabilitation of the forest. And as I mentioned, this is the payment for ecosystem services is just a channel from which funds can be directed. So up here in the upper part of the funnel, we can have national government agencies, the business sector, banks, investors, or foundations like the Forest Foundation of the Philippines or Shell Foundation can contribute as much as they can in kind or in funds, in money, into integrated management of the forest, and it can support the different activities in the forest, such as reforestation and other aspects needed, like research. So this can be the different sectors can contribute to different parts of the reforestation of the forest. This is the Cagayan de Oro River map where different sectors can contribute. So in closing, I would like to say that integrated river basin management is a way for which we can restore damaged or disturbed rivers in river basin. And as such, having this nature-based approach will prepare our wetland to be able to adapt and mitigate the impacts of climate change, such as extreme events, extreme weather, extreme precipitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anadel, for sharing positive result of integrated management of the river basin. It's also impressive, like how enormous number of organizations and sectors are basically implementing together. That's impressive. Okay, to build on that, we will now hear from Mr. Dhruv, who is a Senior Technical Officer of Wetlands International South Asia. He will share the case study on the nature-based solutions intervention and Tampara in India. Mr. Dhruv, you have 15 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure, to speak to all of you on this interesting topic of wetlands and nature-based solutions. Arun, can you please confirm that my slides are visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think before I go into the India level, let's say, case and learnings, I think I would start with what is really happening around in the past, let's say 25 years or even before that. I think when we wake up in the morning, we look at our newspapers or we look at our social media. At times we see, such news clippings where some sort of hazards are happening, where some sort of loss and damage are reported. Also, we have, nowadays good reporting on what environmental damages or what environmental affairs are currently happening around the region, right? But I have pulled out a couple of posts which show how the climate-related risks, disaster risks, and wetlands are related with each other, right? Something like the one in the middle says the cyclone Amphan destroys 1/3 of world's largest mangrove delta, which is also a habitat for the Royal Bengal tiger. Now, if you look at it, it's not just a subject for, let's say, people who are working on wetlands. It also becomes a subject for people who are working on wildlife. It's also equally important for people who are working on livelihoods such as ecotourism and agriculture, and so on. And similarly, on people working on governance related issues, right? So I think the very first, let's say, message I would like to give is that yes, we have a responsibility to document all these things, to document how wetlands disasters are interrelated. But also, I think we have to communicate more with the wider stakeholders to really show like why it's not a matter of just wetlands or one other sector, but it's an issue which the society and even the whole the biome or the biosphere is dealing with. Now I've just pulled a case here from Delhi where the newspaper says, the first newspaper, it's from July 2023. It says that New Delhi records wettest July day in decades as deadly floods hit the northern India. This is how, like, the perspective is built. On the other hand, I think after a couple of days or maybe perhaps a weeks, another story comes, which is there at the bottom side. It says Yamuna reclaims the river Yamuna. It reclaims its old course as water reaches a monument in the city. So what I'm trying to show here is that it's a matter of perspective. So when we say that it's a climate risk or let's say it's an ecosystem service, we also have to understand what kind of perspectives are there. So what is a flood? And I think the previous speakers, right, from Misaka to Professor Renadel and so on, I think they reiterated that floods, as we see, yes, it's a hazard, could be a disaster also, but it's also a natural phenomena. And we are experiencing floods because we have encroached upon these floodplain areas. So that's how I think the narrative and perspectives, they really matter. Now coming to a bit focused slides on wetlands and DRR, I will not go much into it, but I think that this was already covered by Misaka. But at the same time, I think many of you deal with managing wetlands, preparing wetland management plans. So yes, there are resolutions. There is a good amount of mention in the strategic plan. Even now, we have a new strategic plan from 2025 onwards. But at the same time, the guidance documents on preparing the management plans also talk about that we have to understand what kind of climate and disaster risks we have. But at the same time, I think we do realize that there is a need for capacity development. There is also a need for technical understanding. But at the same time, that we also need to have conducive policy environment or settings to really integrate wetlands and DRR sector when we go for management planning of the wetlands. I will not cover this slide in detail, but I think you all know and agree that yes, wetlands, if they are healthy, they host unparalleled values. They have a big amount of importance, right from services or benefits like drinking water and so on, and wildlife and even flood protection. But the very important thing which I would like to highlight is that it should be in a condition where it is in a natural or let's say in a healthy state. I think only then all these ecosystem services a wetland will provide. Otherwise, I think in many countries, many cities in our neighborhood, we do have wetlands, but they are in bad state. They are polluted, and I think they do not give us drinking water. They are not supporting any sort of livelihood. They are not, let's say, good habitat for the wildlife. So all these services are compromised if they are not healthy, right? So that's why I think we need to understand the nuances and also these implications when we say that wetlands are important for disaster risk reduction or nature-based solutions. That yes, we also have a responsibility to ensure that these services they come and the wetlands are healthy. Now, I think this diagram was also there in the previous slides, I guess. So the message here is that yes, wetlands are important, but usually the connotation is that wetlands buffer the physical impacts of a hazard. Something like cyclone is hitting, tsunami is hitting, mangroves will buffer it, which is, I think, an absolutely true statement. But we also have to understand how the disaster management cycle goes, because at times, many of you might also be working with NGOs, with think tanks, knowledge institutions, and all. And for a disaster management, we have a whole cycle where we start with response, recovery, mitigation, preparedness, and many other cycles or stages in between. And if we really look at nature, wetlands, they do have a role at all these stages. Something like buffering, yes, but they also help us in coping with it. They also help us in recovering from it through the provision of the ecosystem services we derive from wetlands. Now, one sort of a interactive slide is this. When we say that yes, wetlands function for DRR, uh, at times it's an oversimplification, but as wetland practitioners, as people who understand wetlands comparatively or relatively better, we need to look at a couple of things. For example, where is the wetland located? Because at times, at least people who are, I think, joining us from the mountain sides or from, let's say, the hillsides, they also know that at times the mountain wetlands, they also trigger gloss. Well, that doesn't mean that wetlands are bad, but the thing is that those wetlands are not monitored, right? And the message here is that depending on the location of the wetland in the watershed or in the river basin, they might have different functions to perform towards nature-based or as a nature-based solution, or towards climate mitigation, adaptation, or disaster risk reduction. So the location of the wetland, it matters. Also, at times, the size, because large wetland, yes, it can buffer a lot of things, but even the small wetlands can provide a lot of services where local villages, localized benefits can be derived from the smaller wetlands also. The other thing is about the health. I think I have already emphasized about the health, so I will not go much into it. And all these things, the last sort of question here is that how wetlands management is important to ensure that all ecosystem services and disaster risk reduction functions are maintained. That's a management question, and I think when we deal with preparing management plans, we have to ensure that all these considerations related to wetlands own character, and also the requirements from the landscape, as in what people need, how the landscape is, I think we need to consider it when we are going for wetlands management. uh, I don't know whether it is blocking the screen now. Talking about some evidences, because at times when we interact with other stakeholders, they ask for evidence, like, really my wetland does this, can you share any evidence? So although, to be very frank, when I was looking into it, they are so there is a scarcity of evidences. In my opinion, I think we need to work, I think researchers who are here, scientists who are here, I think we need to work more on documenting how wetlands can function as disaster risk reduction. There are good amount of papers, but they are slightly the primary or the evidences still need, I think, more robustness. Anyway, this is like how wetlands act as buffers. And the message here is that it's important to understand the ecological condition and the functional capacity. Because simply saying like mangroves can buffer cyclone is not really enough. When you actually go for implementation, you might need, people might ask, okay, how much land you need? What is the width exactly you need for plantation? Is it, let's say, 1 kilometer width is good enough, or let's say 5 kilometer width is good enough, or what sort of composition of vegetation or mangrove associates and true mangrove plants you need to ensure that the function towards disaster risk is provided. So I think this paper, although it's an old paper, it shows that how the graph, if you see towards the right hand side, it shows how when we towards the x-axis, how the width of the mangrove increases and how number of deaths decreases. So when, let's say, the mangrove width was, let's say, beyond 2 or 3 kilometers, the deaths were relatively less. Now, another evidence that how the wetland type and location in a basin can affect DRR planning. This paper is from 2023. It says that riparian wetlands, I think you all know what riparian wetlands are, they mainly decrease the peak flow and reduce the downstream flood volume of a river. However, slightly far away from the riparian zone, the isolated wetlands, which are maybe not connected directly with the river or other wetlands. So the isolated wetlands, they predominantly decreased flood volume and mitigated the peak flow in the basin in a very low magnitude. So that's how different type of wetlands can perform as disaster risk reduction or as a nature-based solution for DRR. And at the same time, since both of these are wetlands, they both functioned or work towards alleviating or reducing the drought conditions. So this is, I think, a good evidence about how different wetland types and their location can help us in ensuring that these wetlands act as nature-based solutions. Now, this is about the potential to function towards DRI and how the climate change, the risks that are becoming, let's say, very abrupt, difficult to predict, how these can also affect the wetlands character. This basically shows that our wetlands are also vulnerable. I think this messaging was also there in the previous slide, but this particular evidence or paper shows that if we have extreme floods, and I think that is the case in most of our countries, that although we have floods, but in some cases we also are receiving extreme floods. So when we have extreme floods, it resulted in loss of almost all ecosystem service. So then we have to really look at what kind of risks we have and what kind of wetlands or solutions we have. On the other hand, the small floods, like the floods which are maybe comparatively natural, which are, let's say, recurring. So small floods had neutral or maybe perhaps sometimes positive effect on the wetland itself because it's a natural phenomenon. It brings, let's say, fresh water, it brings a lot of sediments, productivity to the floodplain areas. So it can also bring some positive impacts, but extreme floods are very detrimental. So what kind of risks we have in our region or landscape where we are working is important to understand before really going into nature-based solutions or, let's say, wetlands, promoting wetlands. So this is how we are the messaging I want to portray here. Now coming to the case, I think I will have 3-4 slides on the case. I will not take much time. So this case is from India. I assume that you know a bit about India. So this case is from the eastern coast of India. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Slightly south or southwest of Bangladesh in the Bay of Bengal. We have a province or a state called Odisha. There we have a wetland called Tampara, right? It's a wetland of nearly, I think, 250 to 300 hectares, decent size, and it's a source of fresh water for a town nearby and also a lot of villages nearby. It supports livelihood for local fishers and farmers. It also, buffers flood and droughts. The very interesting thing is because it's a freshwater wetland, but it's also very close to the sea. Having this water ensures that the groundwater is also in a good shape or it's intact. And if we have good groundwater, the risk of saltwater intrusion in the aquifers of this area is less. So that's why having this wetland in a healthy condition with fresh water is very important to ensure that we do not have the risk of saltwater intrusion in this whole landscape, right? Now, I will briefly talk about the risk and what kind of solutions we sort of attempted or implemented a couple of years back. Now, if we look at the risk, so what is really happening or what are the drivers is that around the wetland or in the catchment, the land use land cover is changing. So from wetland to non-wetland or from natural to non or human modified land use classes are increasing. Similarly, fragmentation of water channels. So all the water channels which are feeding this particular wetland were getting fragmented. And because of that, the main wetland was receiving less water. Third, that because of changes happening, I would say around 100 or 150 kilometers down, there is a development of port. Because of that, all the sediments which are coming from the south, the oceanic currents which are bringing the sediment is not really coming to this beach. And that's why this beach is getting eroded, and people are now more exposed because the beach is, getting thin and thin and thin day by day. And also there are some governance related issues that people, or like the governance or the policy, they really do not factor in how wetlands or nature can provide solutions to a lot of risks, we are talking about. Now talking about the right hand side where some interventions were there, is that when we look at the landscape scale approach, yes, we have to work on the main wetland we are talking about, but also we have to look how the connected wetlands, like all these blue dots, can reduce the pressure on this wetland. So what we did is, besides working on this main wetland, we tried restoring, or I would not restoring, but I would say rejuvenating these satellite wetlands with the help of community. So we ensure that community understand it. They, pick up, this wetland conservation. They become community stewards. We link them with the government policies and programs, and all these small wetlands are also in a healthy condition so that the pressure on the main wetland is slightly reduced. Then a bit on the sustainable, or let's say climate smart livelihoods, duck rearing, using fish and paddy cultivation together, using duck cultivation and fishing together, so that the droppings of the duck also helps fishes in getting nutrients and all. Then preparing management plans, integrating wetlands in different policies, something like livelihoods, disasters, and so on. And also, because wetland was important, I think bringing some sort of recognition to the wetland also helps in advocacy, and ensuring that the wetland receives, let's say, its due credit, due recognition, or also attention from the conservation community. So we got it designated, I think, in 23 or 22. So with all these things, I think we had, a lot of interventions. I won't say that yes, all are solutions, because at times these are just interventions and maybe not a full-fledged solutions. But over time, if they are continued, these things can become nature-based solutions and really give the outcomes related to the eco-DRR, resilience, mitigation, adaptation, and so on. Now I'll just quickly show some photographs how these interventions look like. This is basically a community-based wetland management plan. It is drawn on a local art form. I think we call it Pattachitra. So community discussed, they envisioned how they want to look at their wetlands, how they can manage it. And then they wrote down some actions where they committed themselves that, yes, we will do it. So this one page painting is their wetland management plan, and not, let's say, 100-page document, which usually sits in our laptop or government's laptop or systems, but people do not know about it. So I think community-based or anchoring this thing with community really helps a lot. Now, I think some interventions with school students, with youth, with women self-help groups, with different type of people depending on wetlands, be it fishers, be it agriculture people, be it, let's say, bird watchers. So all these, connecting with all these people and intervening, let's say, on wetland and also on its catchment, on different systems, really helped in getting positive outcomes. So this is how the interventions, the eco-DRR interventions in Tampara look like. But I think the very important thing is that to sustain these things, I think we need to ensure that some sort of policy integration happens, because after project, things really die. In our case also, some things could not continue, but a majority of things, they are still there because they have been integrated into the local planning or other sectoral planning. And through those plannings, they have some funds, they have some monitoring mechanism, and some of these things are still in place. Now we also got this study, in a cost benefit and equity analysis, and I think you all can read this. It says that yes, gender sensitive interventions really help in in contextualizing it, in acceptance of people, like they really want to accept this interventions. Also, I think promoting women to earn wages through livelihood practices increased their participation, and also they can now give their inputs in the local government planning processes. And last is having community-based wetland plans give them ownership. Because at times, what I was saying earlier, if let's say you and I make plans sitting in another city, uh, maybe it's really good, but its impact will be less. So that's why I think having local anchors, local ownership is really important when we are going for the planning processes. Now, I think these are some of the lessons, and after this, I will be having one last slide. Is that the lessons are having a shared vision is very important with community and also with people who understand wetlands and disasters. Participatory approaches and adaptive design is really a key for implementation. Then informed leadership and identifying champions, because the project proponents or NGO people or others might leave, but if we have community champions with sustained capacities, I think they will really bring the change in the landscape. The second last point is about partnership. And the last thing, as I said earlier, having policy integration is really important for long-term sustenance of eco-DRR or any sort of intervention. Now, one last thing, this is slightly like beyond, let's say, the case, but I just want to present this particular tool, which is about, and I think it's largely for wetland managers, because when we do wetland management planning, we do a lot of intervention, but many of these interventions might also have climate co-benefits. So this is a tiered approach. This is like a tool. So we can see like we have two tiers on the left-hand side. Tier 1 is just about identification of adaptation benefits from wetland management planning and its results, how it looks like. For example, let's say if you are doing some sort of catchment conservation in your wetland, so those catchment conservation interventions can also have some co-benefits related to disasters or climate. So documenting those, identifying those can also help us in leveraging funds, can also help us in having more integrative or cohesive policies when we are going for implementation. So I think with this, I thank you all for your patient listening. And if there is any question, I'm happy to answer that. I hope I have not exceeded my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Dhruv, for giving us the idea of importance of tailored wetland management and also insight into eco-DRR concept in India. For the time being, because we have a comment from Mr. Ashok to Mr. Dhruv. He said that please shed some light on Keoladeo wetland, a World Heritage, for losing its ecological value over the years. If you have any comments on this, please share with us.
All right. Thank you for the question, Mr. Ashok. Although I have been to Keoladeo, I think once or twice, and I think in my understanding, Keoladeo, yes, I think it's a very classical case. I think it has been a Ramsar site for, I think, around 25, 30 years, or maybe more than that. And it also has been a World Heritage site. But even after that, I think the situation is not improving, in a very holistic manner. Although there are a lot of interventions, it is receiving water from different canals and so on. But I think what we should, sort of, look at this issue is from a, let's say, from a catchment or landscape perspective, because the issue is this particular site, unlike other national parks, it's a very small national park having boundary and located in a landscape where we have all agricultural fields, some settlements around. So I think since it's a very, it's like an island within, a very human modified landscape, I think we have to ensure that the conservation priorities or actions are in line with the developmental, priorities. Number one. Number two, I think water is, I think, the main determinant, in this case, because many of the times water is, the point of conflict between stakeholders, as in who will give water, where the water will stay, and so on. So I think having a robust water management plan for Keladev might give us solutions. But to be very frank, I think since it is a very case-specific question, I think I might not have further to add here. But I know like it's a good case for ecotourism. A lot of people are going for bird watching and all. But still, issues, very fundamental issues related to the ecological character of the wetland, I think it still remains unaddressed. So that's what I think I feel about the Keladev.
And again, many thanks again to all of your presentation and case study for your incredible insights. And now let's open the floor for a few questions about the case studies. We asked the audience to leave any questions on the chat. But fortunately or unfortunately, there seems to be no question at the moment, meaning that our speakers made themselves very clear and concise. But if any questions comes to your mind later, please leave them in the Q&A chat, or you can just send us by email after the webinar. We can forward questions to the speakers. Okay, as we begin to wrap up, I would like to invite Mr. Saw to deliver his closing message. Mr. Saw, over to you.
Thank you very much, Adam. You did good. A moderator is a role you played. And also, thank you very much for all the speakers. It was great presentations and case studies. And yes, as a WLI Asia-Oceania's secretariat, I mean, I'm also reading this chat box, and our response was quite positive, and thank you. And then we will continuously, as WLI Asia-Oceania secretary, we will continuously organize this web-based webinar to share our, knowledge and experiences. So if you need anything, any topics, any questions, not really relieved. So please contact us and then show us your demand. Then we'll get back to you with good programs. Whether we have Adam Sangbo, can you show us your face? Sangbo's not here. Yeah, we have Sangbo here. So good colleagues here. Sangbo, you can mute. So we will be around you. So please get us your input. Then we'll bring a great outcome to you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anything want to add?
Mr. Saw, I think for Professor Sansai's presentation, we can get her recording. And as we will share this recording, we will upload this recording to the YouTube channel. So we will embed Professor Sansai's recorded presentation so that we complete all the presentations.
Okay. Thank you. We are about to close the session, but like Connor asked, Mr. Dhruv mentioned that upland wetlands aren't monitored for DRR. Is there a SEPA approach to help that? It's a good question.
Okay. So that upland wetlands are not monitored. Is it upland wetlands? Is it like the mountain wetlands? But I think no. I think what I said is that at times the location of the wetlands impart different character to the wetland functions or the services. What I was saying is that so understanding these inherent features or characteristic of that wetland is important. And now I think coming to his question is about the SEPA approach to help that. I think yes, SEPA is a very cross-cutting thing, and I think we should really make it a practice that SEPA goes beyond the very uh, closed knit group of wetland practitioners, because wetlands are used by different citizens, by different users. In, let's say, in the case of mountain wetlands, these wetlands are also used by pastoralists, herders, and so on. And I think these people can also give us a very important information how these wetlands are doing, whether they have how is the condition, what kind of nature based solution functions they can perform. So I think SEPA is important, and I think we should uh, at the same time, I think SEPA should also include the local traditional knowledge, because understanding or documenting these might also help us in monitoring, let's say, these wetlands in distant or remote areas. So that's what I think my response would be. But I don't know if Mr. Connor is happy with the answer, or if he can. If not, maybe he can unmute and ask.
Okay, he said he's happy. Okay, so we'd like to again sincerely thank you all for joining us, and especially warm thanks to our excellent speakers for their time and expertise. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this webinar, so we are gonna send the survey link to you via email soon. Your feedback means a lot to us and will also help to make our future events even better. Just a last note, the recording of today's webinar will be available and uploaded to RRCEA YouTube channel later. We will send out an email once the recording is ready. So thank you all again for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.